One of the first fuzz pedals ever created in the 60s was the British Rush PepBox. I got to sit down with the inventor's daughter, Lucy Rush, and hear about her story growing up around such an iconic piece of history and her father's story. So here it is.
My name's Lucy Rush. I'm the daughter of Pepe Rush, and my dad invented the Rush PepBox.
So to get to know you a little bit more, what was the first album you bought with your own money?
Limp Bizkit, Chocolate Starfish. I was doing work experience. Don't know if you do that in America. So like year 11, which is our last year of senior school or high school, you go and work somewhere for a couple of weeks for basically nothing. And it was there, and I had my eye on it the whole time, and I was hoping that the guy would give it to me as like a present for working for him, for paying me nothing, but he didn't, so I bought it myself.
What's your first memory of your dad's profession, him making things and creating things with electronics?
His workshops, sometimes not being allowed in. He used to let me play with the solder, because I was fascinated by the way that the solder flows. He used to let me play with it. And I used to be very careful when he used to hold the iron with me as well, so I wouldn't get burned. I remember that.
How did your dad get into electronics? Like at an early age, or was it something his family did? What do you know about him being younger and finding his way into making circuits and designing pedals and amps?
So he lived in Soho with his mum and his dad and his granddad, and he was very close to his granddad. And he came home from school one day, and I think his granddad was looking at something to do with amplifiers, and it just interested Dad. I think he'd taken it apart, so he must have been looking at the inside, and it just interested Dad so much that he was like, right, I want to learn that. So I think they just started buying him books, and he just started sucking up knowledge like a sponge.
For all of us who never knew him or were never close to him or really even got to see him say much, what was he like?
Well, he was hard work. Very temperamental. He came from a show business family, so he was very loud and confident. Great dad, yeah, and he looked out for me a lot, like, you know, if I was his little girl. Hobby-wise, so he loved photography, he loved comedy, he had a really odd sense of humour, and he could drive people up the wrong way. Really, anyone that knows Dad could tell you that. But that's part of his charm, really.
So there is a supposedly 1964, the Fuzzy.
Yes, I've seen that, pictures of it.
So this is really cool and important historically. Mm-hmm. So your dad, it seems, built this in 1964. The first guitar pedal ever made in the history of the world is called the Maestro Fuzz Tone.
Yeah,
it was made in Michigan.
Okay.
And it is what the Rolling Stones used on Satisfaction.
Okay.
So your dad builds a pedal here, 1964, that to my knowledge, sitting here, the depths I have dove in history and talked to, would be, I don't know what level he sold these at. Obviously there's a picture. Uh-huh. It's probably the second fuzz pedal ever made.
Yes, so it would be the first distortion, the first fuzz pedal made in the UK.
Yeah.
Is what I know.
If that's accurate, your father built the first manufactured fuzz in the UK ever. But 64 is really wild in a timeline of like being one of the first. It predates the Tone Bender by Macari's Solo Sound. It predates Vox. It's really crazy. Yeah, it's a really cool thing. Something to be really proud of. In 1965, there was what was called a London Trade Fair. And I think it was August of 65, there is an advertisement for the version 1 of this. So that's really significant too, because that's kind of the same time or maybe a little before even the Tone Bender, you know, very similar. So there's a lot of things going on in England, and he's kind of right there in the middle of it. Are there any like family stories or anything about when this version first came out, or is there anything about when it was released or why he did it or anything historical?
I think somebody came into the factory, how Tara was told a story, and he said about a band and talked about distortion, and Dad just came up with a circuit. I think it's something to do with one of his amps. He took parts from one of his amps and he just put it together and it just made the noise. because that was what it was like for Dad. He could just do things.
So these original, we'll call them version 1s, I guess, Germanium PepBox 1966. They said WEM, so Watkins Electronics Manufacturing. Now, that was Charlie Watkins. How did your dad meet him? What's that story like?
I don't know how they met, but I know how everything went down with them. So he was building them, and Charlie Watkins was selling them for Dad. Now, when at the time they weren't kitted out to be able to build them. So he was building them, and I don't know if you heard about the whole thing of WEM taking over. So Charlie Watkins took a circuit of Dad's to the PepBox and put it into an amp. And Dad was like, that's my circuit, you know. So obviously if you're going to do that, you should at least tell me and offer me something for it. You know, it was like about 67. And that's when Charlie Watkins said to my dad, you've had enough, I'm not giving you any more money. Something that always gets me is the one that John Lennon's using, which is 1966, the recording of Revolver at Abbey Road. That would be Dad's. So that a lot of people go, no, it's a WEM one, it's not a Pepe Rush one. It is, because it wasn't until 67 that WEM started making them themselves. So any PepBox that was made before 67 up until then is one that my dad made. And he would have used the same engraving machine, and I've got a WEM template at home. So, it would have been like me making them for you and then putting JHS and then selling them. So that one that John Lennon's got is my dad's.
The Beatles are obviously a very popular band. And when you start digging into what equipment they used, which a lot of people do, there aren't a ton of photos that show things. It's pretty obvious, like, they use Vox amplifiers, certain guitars, but you see some Abbey Road photographs, and one of the only pedals seen, we see tone bender, we see a maestro, and we see a PepBox. That's kind of it as far as fuzz boxes.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, having a pedal company, there's no better artist endorsement than the Beatles. It's really cool. John Lennon's standing there in 66, and it says WEM on it, but your dad was building them.
Yeah.
So 67, WEM was kitted up and started building your dad.
Yeah, but they started using silicone transistors, and Dad always said, and they were an inferior pedal. They weren't like my dad's, weren't built as well, just weren't as good.
John Lennon's playing what we'd still call a version 1, but it said WEM. Your dad's making them for Charlie Watkins. Then Charlie Watkins, you just clarified for me, I believe, he started fully making them, but he drops the germanium transistor.
Yeah.
And goes silicon.
Yeah.
So I would call that a version 2, just for my reference.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah. Have you seen any of those or know any more of that story?
I only know about people making them. So British Pedal Company is one of them that are making them. I think they say about they've got the rights. They've got not the patent or anything. Because Dad had the registered trademark for the Rush PepBox, and I've had that put into my name. So, but yeah, so people are making them. But like the British Pedal Company that are doing it, they are using germanium transistors, so they're technically copying a Mark 1, but none of them are actually real, because my one is the real one. And I mean, yeah, obviously WEM took over and they're making them, but really it's not a real PepBox because of what happened and the fact that Charlie Watkins took over and made a silicone one. So any of those ones that are out, they're just not real. Simply they're clones.
What are some other pieces of gear besides the obvious Rush PepBox that your dad did? So are there, there's rack units or amplifiers or whatever. What are some of these other pieces of equipment that your dad designed and built that people may not know about?
So there was the mixers, like I said, for London Palladium. He designed those. Bass amplifiers, guitar amplifiers. Jimi Hendrix came down to his factory. Dad used to love telling this story, and he built an amplifier, and Jimmy tested it, but he said he didn't want it because it's not dirty enough, man. The limiter for Pete Townsend, that was something he was very proud of. fact that he was still using it and it had lasted so well. An equaliser, which I have at home, which I'm actually going to try and make one, try and reverse engineer it and make it, but it's a lot of stuff going on in there. The preamp, like I said, for the sound system and Tebby, he designed that. That's still going now, like the limiter, 30 odd years, still working, more or less perfectly. It was incredible.
Were these mass-produced things, or did he just build one-offs? Like, what was a lot of this other gear like?
Yes, so like I said about the limiter, that was the one-off. Well, there was two of those actually. So yeah, it would have been very much made to order one-offs. There won't be like 10, 20, 30 of them out there, which is why I've been having a hard time finding some of Dad's stuff.
What about, you've mentioned guitar amplifiers, what about those?
Yes, so like I say about Jimi Hendrix coming down, I don't know if it was a bass amp or a guitar amp, I can't remember. So like making those, so he made a few of those, and there are some out there maybe still, but like I say, not anything I've seen. And I've got all the diagrams as well for a lot of the older stuff.
So somewhere there's an amp that says Rush Electronics, and Jimi Hendrix said it was too clean.
Yeah, it wasn't dirty enough, man. That was what Dad
wasn't
said.
dirty enough, man.
Yeah, it was not dirty enough, man. That's what Dad said. He said about it.
When did he first teach you anything about electronics, like soldering or anything to do with the circuits? Do you have any early memories of that?
I was wandering around. I was looking after him because he wasn't very well, so I came to be his carer because it used to just worry me that he was on his own and he wasn't well. So I was spending a lot of time at his house, and it was quite boring. And I need to be entertained because my brain's like always working a million miles an hour. I saw the pep boxes, like parts for them. And I think the boxes were there and all the circuit boards and everything was there because he was going to do it originally with my brother, but then my brother just lost interest. And I just said to Dad, like, can you teach me how to do this? And it was literally that. And then next thing I know, he's teaching me and sold the first 20 that I helped him build, sold Macari's, or I think was it 10? I don't know. Anyway, they went in like 24 hours. And it was really cool, something I'd done with him, and people wanted them so badly.
So this might be a little sensitive of a question, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but I couldn't find any information on how your father passed away. So would you mind just sharing, like, how did he pass away?
He hadn't been very well for some time. He was a diabetic as well. He just like a sickness bug, and it just didn't go away. So he was not very well, and then on the Sunday he had a fall, and we took him to hospital, and I went and saw him Monday, and he was very delirious, and he kept talking to me about plugging a computer in, plugging something into the computer. So even to the end, his mind was really technical, he was still thinking about stuff like that, which I thought was quite a comfort. And I went home, and my mum called me, told me to come to hospital, wouldn't tell me why. And all the way there in the cab, I was like, if Dad lives, I'm going to do this with him and that with him, and I'm going to be a better daughter. But unfortunately, he'd already died by the time I got there. So when I was a little girl, I used to say, I'm your daughter, Daddy, before I could speak properly. And I went and saw him, and I whispered that in his ear, and I gave him a kiss. So at least I got to say goodbye, bless him. But yeah, didn't think I was going to lose him.
That's really beautiful. I think he'd be so proud of you. How did you decide, I'm going to take this over and run with it?
I think I got scared. Dad's gone. What am I going to do? I can't lose this knowledge, so I just rushed to build pep boxes and sell them. Just, I don't know, comfort, made me feel close to him maybe.
A lot of the reason I love the history of pedals is they're kind of unnoticed. They you see and they're on the floor, but for me, they are like these connecting points to history. I have a pedal collection, and I, picked this pedal up from 1960 something, and it is a physical link to things that are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
so it
nice
is comforting.
Yeah.
And so for you, it is a quite literal connecting point to your father, which is something I've never ran into. You do a beautiful job with the box.
Well, I have a metal worker in Stanford-le-Hope, which you probably don't know where that is. It's in Essex. And he makes it. They're made out of 16 gauge steel, so thick. He makes them off of an old drawing as well. Dad taught me how to do all the old drawings. So whereas a lot of people know how to draw things on CAD, I don't know how to do that. I know how to hand draw like Dad did. which is actually not good because nobody wants my hand drawings. But luckily my metalworker's cool, he lets me do it, he took pity on me. So then he puts it on CAD. So yeah, so there's that. I don't know, ordering all the parts, get my PCBs from one place, I get components just from an array of places. So gathering all the components up and everything, and then getting the box sprayed when it's finished. This is traffolite, so it's like layered, so you etch it off, so it scrapes it off to get that. So I have to get the traffolite and cut it myself.
What is that process like? You have a machine. Talk about the machine that you use.
Okay, yes. So in engraving machine, so you have a template. So, like for instance, Rush PepBox, you put in the rush, and then you have tools. So you put one tool down and the other, and then you follow the template. So you've got the template and like a following thing here, and then you put your traffolite in it and make sure it's all right. And you have to get the machine to the right size, and then you just etch it off really. And on that side as well, I have different templates for everything, but it is time consuming.
Now, you use a specific transistor. Can you talk about that transistor you use?
Yeah, so germanium transistor, AC41s and AC19 Dad was starting to play around with because they were really good sound that he liked. But mainly ACY41s. Well, germanium's their new old stock, so some of them could be 40 years old, so you really would be getting a sound that people would have been getting when they were getting originally. But they're very temperamental. Yeah,
the detail on this, it's really cool. The original cable out of the side.
Yes.
I like that you've kept
Apparently
that.
A lot of them don't do that.
Everyone kind of stopped that around 67. Yeah, I just love that you build it exactly like the old ones. So how hard is it to make one? Talk about how many you build at a time and how long does it take you?
Sometimes it's 5 at a time, sometimes it's 10. There have been times I have built more, like 20, but never more than 20 at a time. Well, I've got so used to doing it, it's not so hard now.
What are your favorite parts about circuits and design and just the things that you do when you build these pedals?
It's building, it's getting the PCBs, printed circuit boards, and putting the resistors and the capacitors and soldering and getting all the wires and just putting everything neatly. And I have actually cried over them before when I was really late getting an order out and I couldn't get the engraving to look right, and it was slightly lower. This is when I was first learning, like level was slightly lower than the Pep, and Dad couldn't see it and Mum couldn't see it, but I could see it and I was going mad. I wasted loads of traffolite and then I had a little cry, and then Dad and Mum just said, look, just send them out, and I did, and everyone loved them, and nobody noticed that the level was lower than the Pep.
They can be maddening.
Yeah. Oh God.
Nick once caught a pedal on fire. I still don't know how that worked.
Oh wow!
The capacitor shorted and it got so hot it flamed. Do you ever have people say why is it so expensive?
Yeah, I've had people. Well, no, actually, it was only one person. It was a Canadian guy who I was trying to sell to. Said it's very expensive. No one's going to buy it at that price. And I was like, well, actually, people bought it all over the world at that price. Thank you very much.
What's your day the day that you wake up and you need to knock 5 of these out or 10 of these? What's that look like for you?
Well, I get up and feed my cats because I am not a fad, crazy cat lady, but I do love my cats. 2 of them, they're brothers, they're beautiful. I just go in the workshop and I just start off from the day before. So, say I'd have to finish doing the PCBs, or say I put them in, get all the other components like the pots, potentiometers, and put all those in. Just basically keep building them until they're ready to test, and I can send them off.
What would be a dream for you of moving forward? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years?
I'd like to still be building the PepBox. I know that there's probably only so many I can sell because it is such a niche market. I want to get on with this limiter, so I need to contact Pete Townsend about that. The preamp as well, I'm very keen to make the preamp. I know that they'll give potentially lots of sales. Just lots of projects really. So I see myself in 5 years having reverse engineered or got help to make all of these products. So I'd have an array of products, all different things.
Yeah, it has to feel very interesting for you carrying on this pedal with such an awesome history.
I'm really, really proud of it. Like I say, not many other people do it. Keeps me close to Dad as well. Never feel close to my dad as much as when I'm sitting in the workshop with a soldering iron in my hand. So
Thanks so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed this interview and this history. I really, really love sitting down and learning this story firsthand and being able to capture this footage for everyone to see. Such an important pedal with such an important history. In the description below, there's a link. You can jam along with us through BandLab on every jam that you've heard today. If you like this episode, hit like, subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon to get notifications of future episodes. Also, there's a link for the JHS Show Patreon. If you want to be a part of that, it helps with videos like today. We were able to travel to England, do an interview, and all expenses paid by patrons like you, or possibly you. Not sure where you're at on that, but go check it out and let us know if you want to be a part of that. That would be awesome. That's it. This was fun.